Welcome back to Klepper's Corner. Today in history. Today we're diving into February 11th. Apparently the universe's favorite day to say, hey, what if we changed everything? Some dates get a quiet anniversary. February 11th gets revolutions, collapsing empires, murdered philosophers, miraculous visions, heavyweight knockouts, and Thomas Edison somehow patenting half the light fixtures in your local Home Depot. It's like history decided to shove all its plot twists onto one calendar square so future historians could suffer. And here we are, suffering. Let's get into it. Segment 1. Mandela walks free and autocrats walk out. February 11th is basically the Super Bowl of regime change. First, Nelson Mandela walks out of prison after 27 years. And the world goes, holy hell, that's what hope looks like. Meanwhile, the apartheid government watches the broadcast like a kid realizing mom just found the report card. Mandela emerges, raises his fist, and suddenly half the planet is sobbing and the other half is frantically Googling, well, in 1990, probably encyclopediaing, what happens when your entire political strategy collapses on live television. But the pattern doesn't stop there, because Iran also said, new phone, who dis, on February 11th, 1979. The military declared neutrality, which is authoritarian speak for, we're not dying for this guy. And the Shah's entire regime folded like a dollar store lawn chair. Then, Egypt. Mubarak resigns in 2011 after millions in Tahrir Square chant, leave. And eventually the military goes, okay, fine, we'll give the people what they want. Sort of. Temporarily. Until we figure out how to remain in charge again. It's like musical chairs, except the chairs are tanks. The wild thing is how all these movements pivot on the same day but land in totally different destinations. South Africa gets democracy. Iran gets theocracy. Egypt gets, it's complicated. February 11th is basically a reminder that revolutions are like Tinder dates. Great expectations, unpredictable outcomes, and someone always ends up ghosting democracy. Segment 2. Yalta, Vatican City, and Spain invents the no thanks, I'm good monarchy. Moving from revolutions to paperwork, February 11th also brings us diplomacy's version of a group project, the Yalta Conference. FDR, Churchill, and Stalin sit down in Crimea in 1945 and decide, let's divide Europe like a pizza none of us intend to share. They promise free and unfettered elections, which Stalin hears as free, unfettered, and entirely fictional. Russia gets a sphere of influence. The West gets decades of regret. Everyone gets the Cold War. But if Yalta is the messy divorce of Europe, the Lateran Treaty of 1929 is the Vatican's Emancipation Papers. Italy says, fine, you can have your own micronation. And the Pope gets 110 acres, a financial settlement, and the right to run the world's only country where the residents are 100% clergy. Mussolini takes credit. The Vatican gets independence, and Italy finally stops having a pope sitting in a palace refusing to leave like a medieval Airbnb squatter. And then Spain. Poor Amadeo I. The guy lasts 2 years on the throne before deciding this is too much, and dips on February 11th, 1873. His abdication letter basically says the biggest threat to Spain is Spain. The Cortes immediately says, Republic time, which lasts barely a year. February 11th, ladies and gentlemen, the day monarchies tap out like exhausted wrestlers. Segment 3, Japan's origin story and Ethiopia gets a makeover. Japan celebrates February 11th as National Foundation Day, marking the mythical ascension of Emperor Jimmu in 660 BC. Mythical, as in Japan basically said, we would like a more cinematic origin story, and history obliged. Then, in 1889, Japan uses the same date to roll out the Meiji Constitution. Part modernization, part we promise democracy, sort of. Please ignore the fine print about the emperor being sacred and inviolable. Meanwhile, on this busy date, Ethiopia also gets a reboot. In 1855, Kasa Hailu becomes Emperor Tewodros II and decides to turn a fragmented region into a centralized state. Unfortunately, his reign ends with a British invasion, a siege, and the kind of finale that makes Game of Thrones look emotionally stable. But February 11th marks the beginning of Ethiopia's modernization, proof that even a turbulent start can still build a nation. And if you think that's dramatic, wait till we get to the British annexation of Awad. On February 11th, 1856, the East India Company walks in like, "We're taking this now." And everyone affected goes, "Oh, that seems like something we'll violently object to in about a year." Spoiler, they do. It's called the Indian Rebellion of 1857, and British colonial planners act shocked that forcibly taking kingdoms sometimes has consequences. Segment 4, Science Levels Up, from alchemy to gravitational waves. February 11th isn't just politics, it's science's glow-up montage. In 1144, Robert of Chester translates the first major Arabic alchemical text into Latin, which is how Europe learns about alchemy, the philosopher's stone, and centuries of men in robes blowing up basements while swearing they were this close to turning lead into gold. Fast forward to 1847. Thomas Edison is born. A man so committed to innovation, he basically speed ran the entire U.S. patent system. If Edison were alive today, he'd be the guy pitching subscription-based light bulbs. And then 2016, the LIGO team announces the first detection of gravitational waves. Einstein predicted them. Scientists built giant laser measuring instruments across states to find them. And when they finally heard two black holes collide 1.3 billion years ago, astrophysicists celebrated like they just discovered the universe's mixtape. Space also loves February 11th. We get Space Shuttle Discovery servicing Hubble, Solar Dynamics Observatory launching to watch the sun like a nosy neighbor, and Endeavour mapping basically the whole Earth. February 11th is the day the cosmos lets us peek behind the curtain, only to reveal more curtain. Segment 5, Miracles, Murder Mysteries, Labor Movements, and Political Firsts. Let's talk religion. On February 11th, 1858, Bernadette Subaru sees the first apparition at Lourdes, turning a rural grotto into the Disneyland of Catholic pilgrimage. Healing water, spiritual renewal, and a gift shop that probably sells holy-themed snow globes. Then, philosophy. René Descartes dies on February 11th, 1650, in Sweden, allegedly from pneumonia. But recent scholarship suggests maybe arsenic, because nothing says philosophy is dangerous like potentially being murdered for teaching a queen too much Cartesian reasoning. Imagine dying because someone feared you'd talk a monarch into rational thought. Rough. Labor movement. February 11th, 1937 ends the Flint sit-down strike, giving the UAW its first major win. Workers literally occupied the factory, which is like if your entire job was sit down and refuse to leave until corporate gives in. Honestly, inspiring. And politics. February 11th, 1975, Margaret Thatcher becomes leader of the Conservative Party. The West officially enters the era of Thatcherism, hair volume, and economic policies that would still traumatize Britain 40 years later. Oh, and February 11th is also the birthplace of America's favorite political verb, gerrymandering. In 1812, Elbridge Gerry signs a map so distorted it looks like a drunken salamander tried to draw itself. American democracy has never recovered. Segment 6, the arts, the tragic, and the completely unexpected. Finally, the emotional roller coaster segment. February 11th, 1963. Sylvia Plath dies, leaving behind a body of work that becomes foundational to confessional poetry. February 11th, 2012. Whitney Houston passes, reminding us that brilliance and tragedy often walk too closely together. But then February 11th tries to cheer us up by giving us the greatest upset in sports history. Buster Douglas knocking out Mike Tyson in 1990. The entire planet went, wait, he can lose? Even Mandela's release was later that same day, making February 11th, 1990, one of the most improbable what even is reality days in modern history. February 11th just doesn't do normal. It swings from political collapse to artistic milestones to boxing miracles, like it's trying to hit every category on the historical bingo card. In conclusion, February 11th is the overachiever of the calendar. Revolutions succeed, dictators resign, empires crumble, constitutions launch. Scientists listen to black holes screaming across space-time. Philosophers die mysteriously. Workers win, singers fall, boxers shock the world. And somehow, the Vatican becomes a country between breakfast and lunch. It is a day that repeatedly tells humanity the world you woke up in may not be the one you go to sleep in. Sometimes that change brings freedom, sometimes turmoil, sometimes gravitational waves, sometimes Mike Tyson face-planting onto a canvas. But that's history. Loud, messy, unpredictable, and occasionally wearing boxing gloves.